What is up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, the playoff edition. It has finally come. We're stoked to be here. My name is Jeff. I'm joined by Daniel, as usual. And, I just can't stop thinking, Daniel, about a few months ago, we're talking about whether baseball was even going to happen. And then baseball was going to happen, and it was only going to be 60 games. And with the Dodgers this, with the Dodgers that. And yet here we are. The Dodgers are the number one seed. We're heading to the playoffs.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It feels like that was kind of just yesterday and the season just flew by. But at the same time, it also feels like that was like 5 years ago. And it feels like it's just a weird season. I don't know. But here we are. The Dodgers made the postseason once again, to no surprise. And we got clarification on who they're playing and everything. So it should be a good show tonight.
Yeah, it is funny. It's on one hand, the baseball season moved so quickly, and yet the world's moved so slowly. It's like those two things even themselves out. And like you said, it feels like this has both gone by quickly and not. And yet here we are. And even a week and a half ago, maybe we were sitting here following a Padres game talking about, do the Dodgers want to win the division? Not. They end up winning the division comfortably. They end the season on, I believe, a 4-game win streak, maybe 5 games. And Wednesday night, they play the Brewers. So tonight's show is going to be all about the Brewers, the playoffs. And so here's kind of how we'll break it down. We're going to start with some playoff roster predictions. We'll talk about the pitching staff. We'll talk about the lineups. And then we'll switch gears and we'll talk about the Brewers. I mean, it's a weird season in that for the first time, the Dodgers will have not played any of these teams this season. And so for a Dodger fan, it makes sense if you're unfamiliar a little bit with the Brewers, especially with some injury stuff that they've had of late. So we'll talk about the Brewers. Then we'll just look big picture. How does the playoff bracket, so to speak, break down? And if we've got times, we might get to some awards. But let's start with the playoff roster. And the first note for me that I had to remind myself, 28 members of the playoff roster. It's a 3-game series. You get 28 men. I mean, it feels unbelievably like overkill, but they were so worried about the weird season. So we got 28 players that Dave Roberts can choose from. Now, when I break that down, there's about 19 guys that are shoo-ins to me. And you tell me if I read off these lists, tell me if any of these guys are even question marks to you. Buehler and Kershaw, the obvious ones in the rotation. As far as hitters, we got Austin Barnes, Will Smith, Corey Seager, Justin Turner, Max Muncy, Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, A.J. Pollock, Chris Taylor. Now, some of those guys have struggled, but I don't think there's anybody in jeopardy there. From the bullpen, I think is where it gets a little interesting. Jansen, Trinan, McGee, Gonzalez, Baez, Kelly, Gratterall, Kolarek. I think those guys are either name brands or have pitched well enough this year to where they probably don't belong. So that's 10 pitchers, 9 hitters. Is there anybody that on that list that you question? There might be some other guys that you think are shoo-ins, but from that list so far, are we good so far?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So that brings us to the I think the biggest storyline for me is that Dave Roberts, kind of an offhanded comment he made a few days ago, he said of the 28-man roster, the team's only planning on keeping 12 to 13 pitchers. Now, that struck me as very strange because A, it always feels like you try and maximize the number of pitchers you can get, especially in a 3-game series. Yes, you want your starters to go, but who knows what that looks like. But we're also playing with the designated hitter. So the need for pinch hitters seems strange. So the idea that you would keep even just 13 pitchers is bizarre to me. I mean, do you have any understanding of why Roberts would look at the roster and say, hey, we just want 13 pitchers?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, to be honest. Like you said, with the DH, there's not double switches and all these defensive substitutions and stuff like that. So you don't need an excess of position players. There might be games where you have the same 9 position players for the whole game, and that's all you need. Maybe one pinch hitter or 2, maybe a pinch runner late, but either way, that's, you don't, it's not like you need 18 position players or 16 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's only a 3-game series. That if they beat the Brewers, they would get to redo their roster for the NLDS, and then I would expect them to maybe add a pitcher or 2. So in 3 games, or maybe even 2, if they win them both, that you probably don't need more than 12 or 13 pitchers. But with extra innings, and also that they're not doing the extra inning rule that was in play for the regular season, so. There won't be runners on base for extra innings, so games could, in theory, go. We saw the Dodgers in the World Series a couple years ago play 18 innings, so that's certainly possible, and you would think they'd want the extra arm or two just in case something like that does happen.
Yeah, and we'll get to this in a minute, but I also think this is probably as set of a Dodgers roster lineup-wise as they've had in just about any of recent years. And when I'm talking about like platoons, like, I mean, we'll talk about this in a moment, but there's like, aside from the designated hitter, from my perspective, you should be looking at the same 8 guys playing every day. So we'll get to that, but that adds more confusion to me. It's like, okay, so if you have those 8 guys playing, I mean, do you really need 6 more guys off the bench? Like, are you going to pull out AJ Pollock for a platoon in the late innings? Are you going to pull out Chris Taylor for a platoon? Like, I just don't see it. And so, anyways, that's where I'm at. So let's break down then. So we've got 10 pitchers. We've got 9 hitters. Let's say Dave Roberts uses the maximum 13 that he has allotted himself. That means 3 of these guys make the list. We've got Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, Julio Urias, Alex Wood, Dylan Floro. I think those are probably the 5 that are in contention. You let me know if I'm missing. Obviously, we're talking about a potential Game 3 starter. They could supposedly, I suppose, go to a bullpen game, but if you're only keeping 13 pitchers, that would make no sense to me. So I imagine one of those guys is your Game 3 starter. When you look at those 5 names, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, Julio Urias, Alex Wood, Dylan Floro, what do you look at from those 5? Maybe who are the 3 that you would choose?
Yeah. Well, Dave Roberts already confirmed that the 3 starters, May, Gonsolin, and Urias, they're all gonna be on the roster.
Okay.
So they're lock. We could put them as locks as well. He didn't say whether any of them will be starting, or maybe it's they're a bulk reliever with an opener, which we saw actually just today. Or yeah, today May came out of the bullpen and pitched 4 innings, so it could be something like that. Or they could maybe, shorten up and be high leverage type guys. Maybe they stick May in the back end or something like that. So
Yeah.
those guys will be on the roster. We're not sure in what role. So I guess that puts them at 13 pitchers. Maybe Roberts, screwed up the numbers and maybe they end up going with 14. I hope that's the case, because I think Bro deserves to be on there too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I hadn't heard that quote from Roberts about May, Gonsolin, Urias. It obviously doesn't surprise me. It makes sense. All 3 of those guys could be, they have the stuff to be high leverage relievers should need be. I think both you and I agree that Tony Gonsolin would be the Game 3 starter if it were up to you and I. But yeah, Floro, to me, I mean, I just can't imagine. Now, I get like the way he's used. Maybe that's why his numbers are what they are. But this is a guy with a 2.59 ERA this season, 2.65 FIP, average exit velocities down there with Jansen and Trinan and the best guys the Dodgers have. He's 3rd among Dodger relievers in wins above replacement. I don't understand how he could possibly. And maybe he belongs on the first list, and then I don't know who else? I mean, Kolarek would seem to be the choice at the beginning, but he's been absolutely lights out. Apparently, he could play right field, we learned today as well. I mean, is Gratterall a shoe-in? Is Joe Kelly a shoe-in? Maybe those are 2 guys that we're not talking about. I don't see how Victor Gonzalez isn't the guy, but to me, Floro is one of the 6 or 7 best relief pitchers the Dodgers have this year.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd want Floro in like high leverage type situations, but he's an arm that you could trust to maybe even give you length, by throwing 2 innings if you need it, or in a late extra inning game, if he ends up being the last guy in the bullpen, that's certainly not the worst thing in the world when you look at some of the other bullpens out there. So I think Floro has earned a spot, and like we've been saying, I feel like you don't need a whole lot of bench players, so I'd rather see them use that last spot on a guy like Floro.
Yeah, and I mean, just so for you, is Floro the odd man out unless they go to 14, or is there another guy on that list that if it were up to you, you would have him in ahead of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would have to be Floro, and it's nothing to do with him. He's been great, but it's just the other guys have been better. I mean, I guess Joe Kelly is a guy who's kind of struggled a little bit and hasn't pitched a whole lot because of his injury and his suspension, but I can't really see them leaving him off the roster. Pedro Baez is another guy who was injured, but he's healthy now, so I think both of those guys will be on. They might not be the first choices in a close game, but I think they'll be on the roster. So I guess if they are only going with 13, then Floro could be the odd man out, which is pretty unfortunate considering the year that he's had.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Urias would be the guy I'd leave out, but obviously Roberts has already said he's going to make it. They talked about Alex Wood being in contention. I mean, again, unless Dave Roberts is struggling with numbers here, I don't understand. I mean, unless they can have 22 pitchers on the roster, like I'm not sure Alex Wood would even be in the top 22 for me. But That's what it's got. So, so I mean, for you, I kind of hinted at this. Is Gonsolin the third starter for you? I mean, if things break that way and they get to a game 3, are you going bullpen game? Are you going Dustin May? Are you going Tony Gonsolin?
Yeah, I would start Tony Gonsolin. He's been great all year. He and he seems to be getting better too. Just when you think like, oh, maybe that Tony Gonsolin shine is wearing off, he comes out and just shoves. So I would go Gonsolin. I would have a short leash though, just because if they do get to a game 3, that's a winner take all type game. That means they lost one of the first 2 games.
Yeah.
So. I would have a short leash. I would have May ready to go. I would have Urias ready to go, and all the other arms as well. So, but yeah, I would go with Gonsolin to start.
I'm with you. I mean, based on the way the Dodgers have played this, I wouldn't be shocked to see a bullpen game type thing where maybe, or at least an opener, Gratterall comes in, he pitches the first inning. And I mean, again, they ran it out with Dustin May. I feel like that's not a coincidence that Dustin May came in for 4 innings today. So it wouldn't surprise me, but it does feel like Gonsolin kind of has earned that and deserves it. So let's switch then from pitching to hitting. Let's say the Dodgers stick with 13, which means they can have 15 hitters. That leaves 5 guys from this list. I've got 7 guys on this list. We've got Edwin Rios, Kike Hernandez, Matt Beatty, Gavin Lux, Jock Peterson, Keibert Ruiz, and Terrence Gore. I mean, a couple of those guys feel like stretches. I suppose, Zach McKinstry, like if you're just looking at every dude who's put on a Dodger uniform, like that's how we have to get to this. But I mean, 5 guys from that list. Rios feels like a safe bet. Jock feels like a safe bet. Beyond those, you've got Kike, Beatty, Lux, Keibert, and Terrence Gore. Who do you like for the other 3?
I'd go with Lux just because he gives you a little speed if you need it. I'm not willing to use a whole roster spot on Terrence Gore just to maybe pinch run, especially with the extra inning rule. There's no runner on second, so you're not even guaranteed to have a runner on late in a close game. So I'm not wasting a roster spot on Terrence Gore. So I'd go Lux, and if you need a guy with some speed off the bench, he would be that guy, and he could also hit a little, obviously. And then who are the other ones? Kike would be in it for me.
Okay, so then you've got Beatty, Keibert Ruiz.
So it's basically Beatty or Keibert for the last spot for me. I'll probably lean Keibert because they're planning on starting Barnes behind the plate for Kershaw in game 2. So maybe they want to DH Will Smith, and you don't want to leave yourself without another catcher, because then let's say Barnes gets hurt and Smith has to go behind the plate, then you lose your DH. So you don't want to have that. So I'd keep Keibert just to have a third catcher, in case anything goes wrong. It's not like you're going to have a million pinch hit opportunities that Matt Beatty all of a sudden is going to be getting in that bat in a game. So.
Yeah, for me, Ruiz is honestly maybe the easiest guy on this list, exactly as you said. I mean, if that allows you to go to sleep at night knowing that Austin Barnes is catching and Will Smith is DHing, then so be it. I mean, it's like you said, the odds of any of these guys really playing a significant role is low. I mean, Ruiz is a switch hitter too, I believe, so that's kind of nice. You don't have to worry about a platoon split. But yeah, I mean, Rios and Jock, as we'll talk about in a minute, I think are no-brainers. I think Ruiz belongs in that list. From there, I think I'm with you. I have Kike and Lux as well. Neither of those guys has done anything to deserve it. They're kind of just the beneficiaries of probably the weakest bench that the Dodgers are going to have going into the postseason. And if we want to talk about a weak spot, I would say that that's unique this year. Usually you get to the end and it's like, oh my gosh, the Dodgers have like 6 guys on their bench that could be starting. This year it's more like, you kind of got to choose between some of these guys. And if Gavin Lux doesn't ever see the plate, nobody's going to be bummed about it. But I do like Lux's hit tool. I think talent-wise, he's there. Kike's been in those spots before, I guess. And Matt Beatty, I mean, I'm not the biggest Matt Beatty fan in the world. There's nothing personal against him. He just feels like a quad A type guy to me. I'm sure somewhere else getting more at-bats, maybe it'd be different, but just doesn't instill confidence in me. I know he's got clutch hits, but if I have to choose between him, Kike, and Lux, I suppose I'll take Kike and Lux there. And I'm with you on Gore. I mean, I think if the Dodgers had a real plan for Gore, they probably would have used him at this point. But I guess that maybe is the argument against Keibert Ruiz as well. Like, why hasn't he been on the roster? They've been allowed 28 men the whole time, so it kind of is an interesting thing there.
And just real quick, to your point on the weak bench, I guess if there's any year to have a weak bench, it would be this one, because with the DH in play, you quite literally don't even need your bench at all. Yeah. So compared to normal years when we see Dave Roberts doing all these crazy double switches and pinch hitting for guys, platoons. I'm kind of looking forward to not seeing as much of that this year.
Yeah, and I mean, like, something I hinted at, but I mean, for me, AJ Pollock should be playing every day. Chris Taylor should be playing every day, and Will Smith should be playing every day. So really, we're talking about the only thing that exists is who's going to DH on like the two games where Will Smith is in game 1 and game 3, assuming there is a game 3, right? I mean, are you in agreement? Like, is AJ Pollock has 16 home runs, and Chris Taylor's like OPS feels like it's 1,000 points higher than the next best guy on this list. So, I mean, am I right in assuming that those two spots seem locked down?
Yeah. I hope so, at least. Dave Roberts did say the other day, he didn't straight up say Chris Taylor's is going to be playing second base every day, but he said that he could see Chris Taylor playing second base every day. So I expect to see Chris Taylor at second base and Pollock either in left field, or if they want to put Jock in left and DH Pollock or whatever. I expect Pollock to be in the lineup. He had another great day today. He hit 2 homers. So he had a great year. He finished with 16 home runs. His career high is 21, and that's in a full 162 game season. He hit 16 in 60 games this year. So great year for him, and he's absolutely earned a spot in the lineup every day. And same for Will Smith as well. Whether he's catching or DHing, he should be in there.
Do we need to clarify AJ Pollock? Is a full season for AJ Pollock a full 162 games, or is that like a full season of like 120 games or something?
56 the year he hit 21. So that was one of his only healthy seasons.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I mean, so we know how the rotation, Buehler's game 1, Kershaw's game 2, which means Austin Barnes is catching in game 2. I'm honestly fine with that. I mean, I think Austin Barnes is as good, as bizarre as it sounds, as good of a hitting option. When you take into account his defense, you could put him behind the plate. He's a slight upgrade over Will Smith defensively. So his defense plus what he can do offensively feels like a net positive, neutral to me compared to these other guys. But then it comes down to, in game 1 and game 3, Edwin Rios or Jock Peterson, from my perspective. Now, game 1, we're going to get to the rotation here in a minute, but Brandon Woodruff pitching for Milwaukee, I imagine game 1, he's a right-hander. Game 2...
He pitched yesterday, which was Saturday. So
for
him to go on game 1, that would only be on 3 days of rest. So I honestly would anticipate Woodruff throwing game 2. And then maybe going with like a bullpen game in game 1 or some crazy Craig Counsell type deal.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, because the other guys, I mean, they do have one lefty, Brett Anderson, former Dodger, who was surprisingly has been decent and had a good start his last time out, which I believe was 5 days ago today. So he'd be going on like 8 days rest.
Well, he pitched today as well.
Oh, he did pitch today. Okay, there you go.
I think it might have been shortened. Let me check real quick. But yeah, so that's why I didn't fit him, or Woodruff may not be an option for.
Okay. Yeah, and so then you've got Josh Lindblom or Adrian Hauser. So if and both those guys are righties. So let's just assume that it's either a bullpen game or you've got a right-hander on the mound. Feels like
real quick, Brett Anderson pitched today, but he only threw 2 innings and 38 pitches. So I guess in theory they could bring him back pretty soon.
Okay. So I mean, against who do you? I guess let me just say, lefty or righty. Does that matter to you when you're picking the designated hitter? I mean, it feels like we're down to Jock Peterson or Edwin Rios or maybe Austin Barnes. And I mean, as bad as some of those guys are, I was actually shocked to see that Edwin Rios has like almost like 26 plate appearances career against lefties. Okay, so it's a very small sample size, but his numbers are actually better against lefties than they are against righties. His right-handed numbers we obviously know about. He's got 9 home runs and 100 at bats. So, I mean, does it matter to you, righty or lefty, or do you just pick one of these guys and pencil him in as your DH?
Mm-hmm. I don't think it matters a whole lot just because of who they're playing in the Brewers and Craig Counsell. You know they're going to get creative. Maybe they'll have an opener, or maybe they'll have 3 guys throw 3 innings each or something like that, and it's righty, lefty, righty. So they may be switching a lot. So I don't necessarily think you should base your lineup based on what hand their starter throws with, because who knows how long he'll be in there.
And especially if these guys are batting 7th, 8th, or 9th. I mean, like they might not even see the starter.
Yeah, exactly. With that being said, though, if they're going with a lefty who might, be throwing longer, which would be Brett Anderson is kind of the only option for that, I probably would leave Jock out of the lineup just because he's never really had too much success against lefties. So I'd probably go Rios in that spot. But if they got a righty on the mound and like if it's Woodruff's game or Lindblom or Hauser is starting, then I'd honestly I'd give Jock the nod in game one, just because of his past success, and he's looked better in the last week. He started to swing the bat better. His eye at the plate's been better. He's taken a few walks, so I'd give Jock the nod in game one just because of his experience. But if he has like an over 4 game with 3 strikeouts or something, then I'm not hesitating at all to go to Rios in game 2 or 3. I guess in game 2, if Barnes is catching Kershaw, then Will Smith is my DH in that game.
Are you even considering Austin Barnes as a catcher, Will Smith with a DH? I mean, like, let's assume Ruiz is there. I mean, is that even on the radar for you, or is it just plain and simple? I mean, even if it's a lefty, like if Brett Anderson were to pitch game 1, you've got Jock who can't hit lefties, Rios who has 26 career plate appearances against lefties, Barnes career OPS of 750. It's not great, but unfortunately that's dramatically better than a guy like Jock. I mean, is that even on the playing surface for you?
It's definitely a thought. I mean, we know they're going to do it when Kershaw's starting, and I've just kind of accepted that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and argue. Me personally, I don't think I would ever start Austin Barnes in the postseason. Just when you look at the difference offensively between him and Edwin Rios, it's like night and day. Like, I think Barnes slugged like 350
it's not
this
great.
year.
It might be a little higher than that, but it's not a whole lot higher.
Yeah, and Rios slugged like over 600, and we know he's a threat to leave the ballpark anytime. So I'd rather have that guy in my lineup. But I do recognize that what Barnes brings to the table, at least defensively and handling the pitching staff. So I guess we don't really know to what extent, so it's hard to say. But if Walker Buehler comes in Dave Roberts' office and says, I want Barnes catching me, then I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and I should apologize. You said 350 was your guess for his slugging percentage?
Yeah.
320. 321 is the slugging percentage. I thought it was like 380. No, 321. So yeah, that is embarrassing on all accounts. I mean, anyways. But yeah, so it is interesting. I think what's funny is Rios is a better hitter right now. Like but Jock has been there and Jock has done it. And the question is the gap between Rios and Jock big enough? And to me, the answer is no. I mean, Jock is a guy, career has an OPS over 800. He's got 7 home runs and 117 at-bats. Now, that's worse than Rios's regular season numbers, but, I mean, Rios does strike me as a guy who, when a team dials in against him and can figure out what the scouting report is and if they're hitting their spots, he could be in trouble, much like Jock. Whereas Jock's going to take a good at-bat. He can work a pitch count. He can take a walk if you need to. So I think I lean Jock. But I mean, I'm not totally opposed to if Austin Barnes were to catch all 3 games with Will Smith as the DH all 3 games, I wouldn't be like appalled by it. I mean, that's as crazy as that sounds. Then you save Rios, you save Jock for the late inning at bat where you feel like you want to get the platoon or you need a fly ball or whatever it is. But that is a good point. I hadn't paid attention to how they used their pitching staff today. As a Dodger fan, we weren't really worried about the last 2 or 3 games. We were mostly concerned about setting up our pitching staff. So I couldn't totally relate to a team that was still trying to figure out today if they were going to make the postseason. But that will be, I think, an interesting storyline to watch. And I do think there's something to be said. I wonder if it would make sense for Roberts just to come out and say, Jock is my guy. Because, yeah, I mean, if those guys are, if Jock gets a start in game 1 and he knows, man, if I go 0-4 with 3 strikeouts, like, you don't want that additional pressure. Maybe even more so for a guy like Rios. If he just comes out and says, hey, Rios is going to be my designated hitter in game 1 and game 3 if we need it, and we'll go from there, at least give the guy confidence. But, I mean, it will be interesting. You don't feel totally great about those guys, but in a moment we're going to talk about the Milwaukee batting lineup, which is, they would kill to have a guy like Edwin Rios or Jock Peterson, I think, in their order. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Let me ask one more thing about the Dodgers before we totally flip the script. Walker Buehler, we haven't talked a ton about him. Last time you and I were on, we didn't really know what was going to happen. I was suggesting maybe he's not even the game 2 starter. Maybe they save him for game 3, whatever. Well, it turns out he's the game 1 starter, so we were both wrong on that front. Buehler, he comes back last Thursday, 4 innings, 1 hit, 6 strikeouts, 1 walk. Immediately, he's game 1 starter. Any concerns for you about Buehler, about game 1, anything along those lines?
I'm not concerned just because it's Walker Buehler. You know, he's done it in the postseason before. He knows what it takes. If he says he's healthy, I mean, he looked great in his start the other day. And when I saw he was throwing before Kershaw, they had him start Thursday and Kershaw start Friday. That was kind of the first hint to me, at least, that they were thinking of going with Buehler in Game 1. For them to go Kershaw in Game 1, Kershaw would have been on regular rest, and then Buehler would have had an extra 2 days as opposed to them both having one extra day, which they've kind of done all season. So I wasn't super surprised by it once they brought Buehler back on Thursday. And I don't have a problem with it. You're playing 2 games regardless, so I don't care who starts Game 1 or Game 2. Both guys are going to start a game in the series, so it is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a 3-game series, so you can't get cute and try looking ahead. And, a 5-game series in the next round is a lot easier to manage without having your Game 1 starter who you want it to be, especially for a team like the Dodgers. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's like if they saw what they needed to see, Buehler hasn't been great. I mean, we haven't really talked a ton about it. He hasn't been great. Obviously, the injury is the biggest concern, but it definitely feels like a guy that once the postseason lights come on, and I mean, let's remember, he pitched against the A's, so arguably the best team in the American League, not necessarily record-wise, but he came out and he did that against one of the 3 or 4 best teams in all of baseball. So the Dodgers have to feel good about that. And it's, Buehler Game 1, Kershaw Game 2, flip those guys, who cares? I mean, both of them are going to pitch in the first round, and from there, it doesn't really matter. At the very least, maybe we don't get Austin Barnes in Game 1. So maybe there's a piece of that matters here, right?
Definitely.
Well, we could talk about the bullpen. We've kind of already hashed that out. I think things are set the way they are. Kenley Jansen's going to be the closer. We have a decent sense. It doesn't feel like there's an 8th inning guy, but it does feel like there's a handful of guys that you could pencil in there. Jake McGee seems like a guy they trust. Trinan seems like a guy they trust. I suppose maybe Pedro Baez is working his way back there, but it feels like Trinan and McGee are maybe the righty-lefty that you like in the 8th if you need one. And like you said, I mean, you've said in the past, it's probably more of a leverage thing beyond Kenley. It's you get Trinan, get McGee in when you need outs. I mean, if you need a strikeout, McGee's your guy. He misses bats. If you need a ground ball, Trinan's your guy. He gets, his sinking pitches are nasty. Not to mention, if Dustin May's available in the bullpen, that's another guy with just wicked stuff. Joe Kelly throws 100, Gratterall throws 100. So that'll be interesting. But I mean, to me, there's not much to talk about the bullpen because we kind of already know the answers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're gonna go off matchups like they always do. I think Dave Roberts leads the league in mid-inning pitching changes, so I expect more of the same. But I mean, hopefully Buehler could go 6 or 7, and then it'll be just a couple guys at the end closing it out. That would be ideal for Game 1, and then same thing with Kershaw for Game 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's flip gears and talk about the Brewers. Again, as I've said, this is a team the Dodgers haven't played this season. Obviously, they've got some history, but a lot of the names that you might be familiar with of the Brewers are long gone. Here's the good news for the Dodgers. The best pitcher that the Brewers have, a Cy Young candidate, Corbin Burnes, is out for at least the first round of the postseason. It sounds like it's probably longer. So their best starter is out. That leaves them with Woodruff, who we've mentioned. Woodruff has been very good, 13 starts, 3.05 ERA. Behind him, though, it's kind of a mess. They've got mediocre options like Josh Lindblom, 10 starts, 5.16 ERA. Brett Anderson, 9 starts, 4 ERA, but striking out 6 batters every 9 innings. And then Adrian Hauser, 11 starts, 5.40 ERA. Yes, those are genuinely their second, third, and fourth best starting options, which is probably why, like you mentioned, a opener or a bullpen game of some sort is probably to be added there. And we'll get to their bullpen in a second. As far as the bats, Christian Yelich is the first name that comes to mind. But most people may not know. Some people may not know. He's hitting 202 this year. So still their second best hitter as far as wins above replacement. But for what that's worth, his WAR is about equal to the 7th, 8th, and 9th best WAR hitter on the Dodgers. Their number 1 WAR player, do you know who it is?
No.
Most wins above replacement in their lineup, Avisail Garcia. Avisail Garcia with his 677 OPS this season. So we're getting some defensive boost there. Jed Giorco, Dodger legend, is up there. He's got an 840 OPS. Keston Hiura has 13 home runs, led the team. He hit 216. Ryan Braun has 8 home runs. Ryan Braun also has a 281 on base percentage this year. Honestly, their best hitter might be a guy that got cut by the Marlins, Daniel Vogelbach, who came over. He's played 18 games. He has 4 home runs and OPS over 1,000. So, I mean, if you want Vogelbach, who literally got cut by one of the worst teams in baseball, to be your best hitter, welcome to the Brewers. I mean, the key to all of this, though, is the bullpen. When you think the Brewers, you think the bullpen, and it's probably not quite as good as maybe it has been in years past, but what they do have is the best relief pitcher in baseball. And no, I'm not talking about Josh Hader. I'm talking about Devon Williams. He has a changeup that nobody can hit. His ERA is 0.33. He's striking out almost 18 batters per 9 innings, so 2 out of every 3 hitters he faces, he's striking out. And they still do have Hader, who was really good for the first month and a half of the season, and really bad the last. He had a 6.48 ERA in September. They've got a couple other decent arms, Freddie Peralta, Brent Suter out there as well. So when we talk about a bullpen game, that is the one thing I would say. It's not like their bullpen is great. So I do think they're going to have to rely on starting pitchers more than they have in the past. Last time they played the Dodgers, they could go bullpen game, but they had young guys you'd never heard of like Woodruff, who could come out, not only hit home runs against the Dodgers apparently, but also throw hard and pitch well. So it's kind of a hodgepodge. I think you and I, as we looked at potential teams, the Brewers were a group that we were both pretty excited about potentially playing, knowing their ace was out, knowing their lineup has been as bad as it is. And so as we think about the Brewers, I want to frame the question that I asked to you like this. And I'll start on the negative side, and then we'll move to the positive side. But as you think about the Brewers, and also as you think about the Dodgers, how would you answer this question? If the Dodgers lose this series, it will be because blank.
If the Dodgers lose this series, it'll be because they do not get to their starting staff or their early relievers.
They don't get. You mean they don't work the pitch count? They don't get into the bullpen early enough. You're saying?
Yeah, I mean it's a short 3-game series, right? So maybe wearing down the pitchers isn't necessarily necessary. Just because it's only 3 games, like it's not like you're going to be playing 5 or 7 games where by game 4 or 5 their bullpen's toast and their starters aren't coming back on short rest or whatever the case may be. So it's only 3 games. Like they could tough it out for 3 games. Maybe if the Brewers wanted to, they could throw Devon Williams 3 innings and Josh Hader 3 innings.
Yeah.
Give them a day off in game 2 and then bring them back for 3 apiece each in game 3 again, which it would suck for the Dodgers. And if the Brewers were able to do that successfully, good for them. But then they'd probably be screwed in the later rounds. But for this series, they could kind of, they're playing with house money. They were the 8th seed, so they could kind of just let it go and see what their top guys have in the tank. So I think it'd be key for the Dodgers to score some early runs, because if you get into the 6th, 7th inning and they got a 1-run lead and Devon Williams and Josh Hader ready to go, chances of scoring off those guys isn't very high.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing I guess I would say, Hader's only thrown 19 innings this year. Devon Williams is at 27. So, I mean, I hear you. The multi-inning thing is real. And I mean, I think that's good. If what you just said is the reason the biggest risk for the Dodgers to lose, that's great news for the Dodgers. Because if there's one thing they're going to do, it's definitely going to get to these starting pitchers and definitely going to be take good at bats and hike up the pitch count. So I agree with you on that. And if the Brewers can get 15 to 18, that doesn't even sound like a lot innings from their 3 starters in these 3 games, that would be a problem. If the Dodgers can't get to the bullpen before like the 5th or 6th inning, every one of these, they're going to be issues. For me, I don't know how concerned I should be, but Walker Buehler concerns me. I mean, again, this guy has been good, but not great this season. He's made 1 start in the last few weeks. He's got the blister issue. I'm not. This is hypothetical. I think both you and I are very confident about the Dodgers being a better team. So I'm not saying Walker Buehler concerns me. I'm saying if they were to lose, I could see Walker Buehler being the reason. If maybe he gives 3 innings, gives up 4 earned runs in game 1, and the offense can't figure it out, that would be concerning. And then if you have to go to a Dustin May or a Tony Gonsolin, a young guy in game 3, an elimination game, when tensions are high and stress is high, that's a potential. Again, I'm not saying any of that is likely, but I mean, the bullpen for the Dodgers doesn't worry me. The bats for Milwaukee don't totally worry me. It would mostly be self-inflicted wounds from the Dodger pitching staff, I think, for me. I mean, any concern? Dodgers postseason hitting has historically not been great. Any concern there? Or do you almost like the fact that they get to play a crappy team like Milwaukee, maybe get the bats going and build some confidence?
Yeah, I mean, the points you brought up are definitely fair. I think we should at least acknowledge that in a 3-game series, baseball literally anything could happen. we saw the Rockies beat the Dodgers in a series this season. They're the only team to do it, but it happened.
Yeah.
And if the Dodgers play, against the Brewers the way they did that weekend, then it certainly could happen again. So I think we should at least acknowledge that. But with that being said, the Dodgers have the strong advantage here. Their lineup, the 9-hitter for the Dodgers, whoever that's going to be, would probably be batting like second or third for the Brewers. So they have the clear lineup advantage. They have the clear starting pitching advantage. I'm not quite as concerned about Buehler as you are. The points you brought up are certainly logical. He hasn't pitched a lot, and when he has pitched, he hasn't looked quite like Walker Buehler. But at the end of the day, he's kind of a gamer. He lives for the big moment. So I expect Buehler to be Walker Buehler when he takes the ball in Game 1, and also just the fact that he's not facing a great lineup. It's not like he's got to get through the 1927 Yankees lineup to get through 6 innings or whatever it is. So I'm not as concerned with Buehler, but I mean it is a 3-game series, and if you have one bad start from Buehler, then you're in a 0-1 hole with having to win 2 straight after that.
And for what it's worth, I mean, just looking up the series odds, the Dodgers are easily the biggest favorite of any team in the postseason. So they're minus 285 to beat the Brewers. There's only one other team, the Rays, are minus 205. Otherwise, everybody else is under minus 200. On the flip side, the Brewers plus 235 as an underdog. The next closest group to that is plus 175. So that, anything could happen. It's 3 games. Crazier things have happened. Obviously the best teams do not always win in scenarios like this, but the gap between the Dodgers and Brewers does make you feel good. And so let's flip the script there. If the Dodgers do win this series, what do you think will be the biggest reason why they are able to do that? Now, and I mean, obviously you could say, well, they get to the bullpen, but something beyond, like, what's another positive indicator for you? You're like, if you don't tell me the results of the game, but you tell me this happens, then I feel really good.
I think it's if they're playing from ahead rather than playing from behind. Like we've talked about with the Brewers bullpen, especially the guys they got in the back, if you get behind, you might not have too many chances to score.
Yeah.
But if the Dodgers are playing from ahead, which they pretty much have all year, that it seems like they score in the first inning every night, I think they'll be in good shape. I think as a starting pitcher, as a former starting pitcher, I know when I was pitching with a lead, it definitely relaxes you a bit more. So I think both Buehler and Kershaw, and if it gets to a Game 3, Gonsolin or whoever else, would certainly benefit from having an early lead. And then once it gets late, I trust the Dodgers bullpen to hold. Hopefully it's more than 1 run when Kenley Jansen comes in the 9th. But the Dodgers bullpen has been solid with leads all season. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think my second one, I'm surprised neither of us mentioned Jansen on the if the Dodgers lose this series ... category. But, yeah, I mean, if Jansen doesn't give up a run in this series, I think that's a pretty good candidate for the Dodgers are going to win if that's the case. But the other thing I would say is just getting some of those bats. I feel good. Justin Turner is a guy I trust inherently no matter what. I think Mookie Betts has earned himself into that category. As far as just postseason, doesn't matter. The moment's not going to be too big. Those guys are going to be consistent. So for me, the Dodgers win this series if 2 of Bellinger, Muncy, Seager, and Pollock, if 2 of those 4 guys can hit. I'm talking like 350 batting average, etc. If 2 of those guys hit, I feel good. I think the Dodgers have no troubles. I would add in maybe on the flip side, if Yelich doesn't hit, I mean, there's literally nobody in the lineup that scares me. If Yelich has no home runs in this series, I don't see how the Dodgers can lose.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as great as the Dodgers offense has been all season, we haven't really seen them clicking on full cylinders. Yeah. Feels like it's been like 2 or 3 guys at a time kind of carrying them offensively. But, they've kind of been starting to put it all together over the last week or so. Obviously, Mookie and Seager are great at the top. Justin Turner's now healthy and looking good. Muncy and Bellinger are swinging it better. A.J. Pollock and Will Smith and Chris Taylor have been great all year. So I think this is the best that the lineup has looked all season. And, hopefully that continues in October.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so looking at the big picture now, we're looking at the series. It's a 3-game series. All 3 games are in Dodger Stadium. Is that right?
Yeah.
Your prediction for how these 3 games play out. Do the Dodgers win? Do they win in 2? Do they win in 3? How do you see it playing out?
I'll go with the Dodgers in 2. They have so much more talent than the Brewers. The Brewers were 29-31. The only reason they made the playoffs is because the league decided to expand it to 8 teams this
Yeah.
year. And any other year, they would have been out of the playoffs. They didn't, to clinch today, they didn't even win on their own merit. They lost to the Cardinals. So the only reason they got in is because both the Giants and Phillies also suck and
Yeah.
lost as well. So they're kind of limping into the postseason. They just lost their best starting pitcher in Corbin Burns. So I think the Dodgers should win this 1-2. I think the Brewers will play them tough. They'll be close games. That the Brewers bullpen, I think they're going to let Devon Williams throw 2 or 3 innings. Maybe Josh Hader throws 2 innings. So I think they could keep it close. But I think the Dodgers will come out pretty easily in this.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have Dodgers in 2. I mean, even if this game gets to 3, I'm probably not going to be worried because they probably would have emptied the clip in game 1 and game 2. And by the time they get to game 3, it's like, okay, well, your best relievers just threw 4 innings in the last 2 days. And, you've got a garbage third starter and you just go from there. So I'm probably as unconcerned about a 3-game series as possible. I mean, I definitely am anxious and nervous and just feeling like all of the negative juju that comes with the postseason and things just never seem to go the Dodgers' way. A 3-game series freaks me out. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think Buehler pitches well in game 1. I think Kershaw pitches well in game 2. And I think the Dodger bullpen is good. Adding to that, the Brewers lineup. And it's like, I mean, do you see the Brewers scoring more than 3 runs in either game 1 or game 2? For me, the answer is no. And I think the Dodgers are going to score 4 or 5 just off the starters alone, let alone the bullpen. So I actually think it'll be pretty comfortable. I could see game 1 being something like 6-2 and game 2 maybe being, 5-3. I guess how comfortable is 5-3 to me? It's like, that's pretty comfortable. But yeah, I'm not totally worried about this series for the Dodgers. Now, we're not going to look ahead. We're not going to jump the gun and assume the Dodgers win, but looking at the rest of the National League bracket, obviously, potentially the Padres looming in round 2. The Padres play the Cardinals. You've got the Braves down at the bottom as the number 2 seed in the National League. Just because we're looking ahead, I mean, outside of the Dodgers, of those teams, is there a team that worries you? Is there a team? And when I say worries you, let me ask this. If you think the Dodgers are the best team in the National League, I think we both do. Who is the second best, most dangerous team in the National League from your perspective?
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that's stopping me from saying the Padres is just the state of their starting rotation right now. If they had a healthy Clevenger and Lamet, I would pick them as the number 2 team pretty easily. But if they don't have those 2 guys, then you're looking at Chris Paddock as your top guy and Zach Davies and Garrett Richards. So that's not nowhere near as formidable of a rotation. So I'm going to go with a team you didn't mention. I'm going to go with the Cincinnati Reds.
Okay.
They've been really well. They got a great rotation. They're going to be playing the Braves in the first round, which I think that's probably the wild card series I'm looking forward to most because the Braves just hit the crap out of the ball and do not pitch it well at all. And then the Reds pitch it awesome and don't hit well at all. So it's kind of a strength-on-strength type matchup. So I think that should be a fun series. But just the thought of facing Trevor Bauer, Luis Castillo, Sonny Gray, and those guys, it's a little scary. Luckily, they're on the other side of the bracket, so if the Dodgers get them, it won't be till the NLCS when it would be a 7-game series, not 3 or 5. So that's nice at least. I
mean, for me, it is the Padres. That lineup, and maybe it's just because it's a known commodity, but it's the lineup that scares me. It's the ability of 3 or 4 of those guys to change an entire series with one swing. Most of these other groups we're talking about outside of the Braves are just not firepower boasting teams on offense. So I'm with you. I mean, the Reds would be brutal. Again, if we got to play the Reds, it'd be a 7-game series. So you're neutralizing a little bit the advantage, especially a few rounds in. And Bauer's already been going on short rest in the regular season, so he won't be at full strength come the NLCS. But there's something about the Padres. I just think they look the Dodgers and they see an equal. They think Lamet is going to be able to pitch in the wild card round. That would be huge for them. Obviously, Clevenger, I mean, who knows? That doesn't sound great. We'll see kind of how risky they want to play that one. But Tatis, Machado, those guys, I mean, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just a rational fear in me, but to me, that's the team that worries me. And I'd hate the fact that they could potentially see the Dodgers in the second round. It would be 5 games. The Dodgers would have the experience over the Padres, but and they did, sort of lose game 1 of that series, and then shut them down in games 2 and 3. So maybe there is a lot of confidence. Maybe the Dodgers would be more confident against the Padres than they would against some of these other teams. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the Padres have, pitchers that they faced before, so I think they'd be more comfortable facing them than a team like the Reds, who have 3 studs who you haven't seen since last season. But I hear what you're saying with the Padres, and like I was saying, if I knew for sure that just Lamet, not even Clevenger, if I know Lamet's healthy, then I would say the Padres are the second best team. But when he's dealing with an elbow issue or a bicep injury, whatever it is, it's an arm issue. So that's definitely not what you want to see this type of year. So we'll see how he looks. But if he pitches in the wild card round and looks good, then I would have the Padres as the second best team as well.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows? We'll see. As I said, the latest I saw from The Athletic was that they're expecting Lamet to pitch game 1 of the wild card series. So they didn't even do an MRI. I mean, maybe you don't take an MRI because you don't want to see what's on the MRI. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, looking across to the American League, is there a team over there? Obviously, the Dodgers have seen the Astros. The Dodgers have seen the A's. The Yankees are the 8th seed in the American League, which is amazing and awful all at the same time. I mean, the Rays are the number 1 seed. Do you like the Rays? Do you like the A's? Who do you like in the American League?
I like the Rays. It's kind of similar. I like teams with good starting pitching.
Yeah.
When you could trot out Tyler Glasnow, Charlie Morton, and Blake Snell. Yeah. Blake Snell, not Smell, but that's pretty formidable right there. And they also have a really good bullpen. So the Rays are the only team not named the Dodgers that won 40 games this season. So I know it's a short season, but that tells me something. That means that they were great all year. They have solid depth. Somehow they're a small market team with no payroll, but they still find a way to be in the mix every year. So credit to them. But yeah, I like the Rays in the AL, but the Yankees will be in the mix as well. They got finally all their guys are healthy, and they got Garrett Cole at the top of the rotation. So it would not surprise me at all to see the Yankees and the Rays in the ALCS.
Well, those 2 teams are playing in the first round, I think, because the Yankees fell to the 8th seed, right?
I think the Yankees are like 5th, so I think they'd play in the second round because the Rays are playing the Blue Jays in the first round.
Oh, you're right.
And the Yankees are playing the Indians.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you're right. For some reason, I thought the Yankees were the 8th seed. They're the 5th seed. But yeah. I mean, I like the Rays too. The Yankees, I mean, Cole and Tanaka, and then that lineup behind them. Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't bet against the Yankees. I don't know what kind of odds you could get on the Yankees to win the World Series, but it feels good. I mean, they're the favorites in their. I should say they're the favorites to win their series. Let's see, World Series champions. The Rays are plus 600. The Yankees are plus 650. For context, the Dodgers are plus 350. So that's a pretty outrageous number. Yeah. I mean, I would not advise anybody to bet plus 350 on a team that has to win a 3-game series, a 5-game series, a 7-game series, and then another 7-game series. So that's just me. But it should be fun. Starting Wednesday night, the AL starts on Tuesday. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
So the AL games are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The NL is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You pointed out the Dodgers and Lakers basically are playing at the same time on Wednesday, which, should be plenty of stress for any Los Angeles fan that wants to. And then we go from there. So they play Wednesday, Thursday, possibly Friday. Everybody gets a day off on Saturday. Is that right in the National League? And then the next round would start on Sunday. At what point do they move to the bubble? Is it after the first round?
Yeah. Okay. So it would be for the NLDS. The Dodgers side, at least the one good thing is that once they get to the bubble in Texas, they would play, if they advance, obviously they would play the NLDS, NLCS, and the World Series for the Dodgers would all be at the Rangers ballpark. So I guess that's the one advantage. But other than that, they didn't really get too many advantages as the number 1 seed.
And once you get to the NLDS, have they announced how days off are going to work there? Is it sort of
it's 5 straight days if they play 5 games.
And then the NLCS is back when you would start getting some form of rest?
No. NLCS would be 7 straight days.
Good Lord.
There's no rest in the NLCS. Then once you get to the World Series is when there's a few off days mixed in.
Okay, so I mean, that's something to watch. I mean, the Dodgers, again, probably prepared, but teams can't be bringing guys back on short rest because what do you do next? I mean, he's going to have to sit out 4 games of the next series just to catch up.
Yeah, you either have to mix in a bullpen game or or if one guy goes on short rest, then everyone's going on short rest
Yeah.
because it's not like you have an off day after that game. So yeah,
And again, these are
I
all
guess,
advantages for the Dodgers, the ability to
yeah,
throw a
and I
bullpen
guess
game.
the key is just to win series is quick, so you
Yeah.
don't even have to worry about that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we're just about out of time, but I'll throw this out. We talked briefly off air about this, but it is the end of the regular season. Awards have been sort of the talk. I joked with you. I don't think the Dodgers are in serious contention to win any awards. I think you agree, but I think they'll be in kind of a lot of third place, fourth place, fifth place votes when it comes to the MVP, the Cy Young, the Rookie of the Year. I could see Corey Seager and Mookie Betts both getting some serious MVP, sort of third, fourth, fifth range votes.
Right.
A guy like Kershaw could get some Cy Young votes. A guy like Tony Gonsolin, I believe, is still eligible for the National League Rookie of the Year. I could see him getting some votes, but I mean, none of those guys are serious players, right? Maybe Mookie.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's coast bias among the voters, so they'll favor someone like Freddie Freeman, or Tatis has been, the story of baseball. So maybe they'll go with him. And I just think the Dodgers have too many good players for them to say, this guy is the MVP, because even though he's the best player on the best team, the Dodgers are still a playoff team without Mookie or Seager or Kershaw for the Cy Young. So I think it'll be similar to the Lakers, where we saw LeBron got second for MVP and Anthony Davis got second for Defensive Player of the Year. I think we'll see some Dodgers in the 2 through 5 range, but I don't think they'll win any awards, unfortunately.
Dave Roberts for Manager of the Year. You casting your vote there, Daniel?
I think we'll see a former Dodgers manager winning that award. In Miami, I think Don Mattingly is probably going to be taking that one home.
Which tells you everything you need to know about the Manager of the Year award. It's like, you couldn't pay me to have that guy coach the Dodgers, and congratulations on the Manager of the Year. Speaking of a team that had brutal luck, I mean, 2 massive injuries for the Marlins today for a team that's thrilled to be making it. I will say, I mean, we didn't talk about them, rightfully so. I love that the Giants didn't make it. It feels like everybody in the world made the playoffs. I had no confidence. I mean, when it was 5-4 going into the bottom of the ninth, I was like, if you don't think the Giants are going to win this game, play the Dodgers in the first round and ruin everything. Like, I've been around long enough to think that's going to happen. And then strikeout from Trevor Rosenthal. It was a beautiful thing, and lots of tears for Giant fans.
Yeah, and it's pretty funny, because when it really came down to it, and that game was in like the 8th, 9th inning, and it was a 1-run game, and it came down to, all right, we're either playing the Brewers or the Giants. I was like, well, now that we're here, I actually would much prefer to play the Giants. I think they would have been an easier opponent. So I was rooting for them to come back. But as soon as I knew I was rooting for them to come back is when I knew that they weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. I have no problem with the Giants losing. I don't mind playing the Brewers at all. So, have a fun offseason.
Yeah, I wanted nothing to do with the Giants. It just was like it was a no-win situation. If the Dodgers were to beat them, it'd be like, so what? You were supposed to beat them. If the Dodgers were to lose, it would have been literally the worst thing imaginable. 2 of my buddies are Giants fans, and it's like anything to avoid that. There was just a no-win for me. So glad to see them gone. I don't think the Brewers are a whole lot better. So we'll see. But I mean, that'll do it for tonight. The Dodgers, obviously, it's a big week. Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday, hopefully not. The Dodgers postseason. Daniel and I will be here with some coverage of some sort. I have to put a disclaimer. My wife is 39 and a half weeks pregnant. So at some point I have to take a break. We weren't sure if tonight was going to happen, but here we are. So hopefully we can do some live stuff, hopefully for game 1, game 2, definitely beyond that. Once we get to the NLDS, I would imagine lots of live recap shows. So stay tuned for that. Follow Dodger Blue 1958 on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. We'll have lots of stuff, lots of coverage, any press conferences, that kind of stuff between now and then, as well as once games start. DodgerBlue.com. We've got all sorts of content, series previews, and that kind of thing. So stay up to date with all of that. But with that said, that'll do it for us tonight. That's Daniel. I'm Jeff. We appreciate you guys watching. This is DodgerHeads presented by DodgerBlue.com, and we'll see you next time.